Premier Doug Ford is calling a rare Saturday sitting at Queen's Park to speed up passage of Bill 31. It's aimed at cutting the size of Toronto Council. Meanwhile, at City Hall, Council is asking the federal government to step in and block the province from imposing the cuts. And, of course, now there's the question about whether or not an October 22nd election is possible. Should come through, though, one way or the other. A whirlwind week, indeed, in politics. And Mayor John Tory joins us now to talk about the challenges that lay ahead. Mayor, thank you very much for joining us this morning. What is the next move for the city in this?
Well, I think the real move is going to be for our lawyers to be going to court to pursue whatever avenues they can to express our displeasure and opposition to the way this has been handled, especially now the infringement of the Charter of Rights. And then I think for our election staff to keep doing what they're doing, which is heroic work in the midst of all this kind of topsy-turvy stuff going on to get the election ready to be held. And so you hope that what will happen at Queen's Park will happen as quickly as possible in terms of just having some certainty so that the election can proceed, and then the court cases will take whatever course they take. Nobody is entirely sure what court cases will come from all that, because there weren't any obvious avenues, but our lawyers are going to work away at that. So really, that's what's going to happen.
Now, if this gets through and it's approved and we drop down to the 25 council election, what will happen? What would happen next election? Would the city be able to revisit and try and go back to 47 if they want to?
No, one of the interesting things about this is the province has taken away the ability the city used to have to decide on its own number of wards, its own number of councillors. So the number would stay the same, one assumes, unless the number of provincial or federal MPs changed, because it's now matched up with that 25, 25, 25. And so one assumes that the election would be the same as the next time, but that also is dependent upon the fact that none of these court cases succeeded. It's very complicated for people. You know what? I think most people out there listening to us talk would just say, well, you know what? And I'm sort of in their camp. Let's have the court cases. Let's make sure the displeasure with this process is expressed. But at the same time, let's also get back to talking about transit and housing and taxes and community safety. And I'm for that. I mean, I want to see, I want to see this play itself out in terms of us thinking this is wrong, but at the same time understanding that we've got to sort of start to focus on the business that people want us to be doing. They're not so interested in constitutional squabbling or election meddling, but this is a very profoundly objectionable use, especially of the notwithstanding clause.
Could the city rebel and say no? We're going to go with a 47. What happens at that?
Here's the danger of that. I mean, I suppose you could do it. You could say, well, we're just going to run the election based on 47 wards, and that's that. It would be an election where, first of all, I think the person who runs the election, the clerk, would say, well, the law doesn't tell me to do that. And people who are public servants like that have to follow the law. The second thing is, of course, the result of that election for all of those who are elected under a set of rules that were not consistent with the law might be invalid. And so, that could have been an option, except it's one of those options that might end up blowing up in your face, because you'd have this election and then you'd have to do it all over again, which I think, as much as I know people like some aspects of campaigns, and I say this as someone who's contested them, I think they'd say, no, one election is quite enough for us. Thank you very much. Just do it properly, get it over with, get on with building transit and all that stuff, and don't do any more of this. Going to subject us to more of this.
Now, they're debating on the weekend at Queen's Park, and if there's any delays, when do we seriously have to consider having to push the election back?
Well, the clerk decides that, and she decides that without political interference. And that quite properly so. She will make a decision as to, and she was talking yesterday about, the more the clock ticks, it makes it harder for her to run the election. I don't think people think about all the details involved of printing ballots and distributing ballots and knowing whose names are on the ballots and knowing which number of wards. So she's got to worry about all that. So I think it's good, actually, that the Premier has said, let's work through the weekend. A lot of this, I think, if people focus, it's controlled actually more by the opposition, because if they just said, okay, we've made our point and we're going to sort of move on so the election can be held on October 22nd, then the bill could pass on Friday night or some other time. But I think that we'll just have to see how long it takes. And I understand why they're protesting. Look, I'm mad about this too, both because they unilaterally changed these boundaries and changed the number of councillors, and because they then moved to use the notwithstanding clause, which I think was entirely inappropriate. That's not what it was meant for. And this is not a matter of national emergency. It's a dispute or a debate. It's a policy change, but not one that required that.
Okay, Mayor, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. It's going to be an interesting time. Let's head upstairs now to Mel with the latest. Mel.